No, you don't have to. I can just keep
You
bubbling.
just go. And we are back between two Yetis on a special night in Miami on day 4 of the boat show, but you're not really tied to the boat show, are you?
Well, no.
So-
I'm not a boat guy, but I like boats too.
Okay. I'm here with ELO, who is a fellow Brit.
Yes,
How you
I
doing?
am a British, thank you.
You are a British.
I am a British, or I'm a Brit, or I am a Britannier, or I am
Britannier.
whatever you call it.
Well, it's you.
You know, my
Same-
father
we're
said,
from the same. Well, we're not from the same mother, obviously, but you know, we are.
we're not from the same mother, but we're
realm.
from the same kingdom.
Yeah, from the same kingdom. But you
The
haven't.
kingdom of cool.
I wouldn't say British people are cool. You're cool,
Nah.
but you're the rare exception to the British type, I would say.
No,
We're normally
my father
reserved
used to
and
say,
boring and-
No.
By the time we get to what, are we the same age? How old are you?
I'm 45.
45. So you're about 5 years older than I am.
Correct.
By the time
Well,
people get to our
I'm not
age,
saying
they-
correct that way. I mean, I meant I am 45, and you may be 40, but you look younger than 40.
I am. I'm 38. So.
Oh, so I'm 7
Thank
years
you.
older. Yeah.
Well, 5, 7.
7.
In
Okay.
fact, why the hell am I putting myself older anyway?
I was like, you look younger. I'm like, he aged good.
So we're in ELO's. What is? It's not really a. Is this a playground? Is this like your garage? Is this like your? How do
Well-
you, what do you describe? How do you describe it to people?
We're at Supercar Rooms, and Supercar Rooms is a brainchild of years of me owning cars and not knowing how to play with them.
Play with them, or where the hell to keep them all?
No. You see, if you want to keep cars, you put them in a storage facility and you forget them, which is what most people do.
Yeah.
I think cars are not just cars. They're a celebration of moments, automotive moments. And sometimes people look at them as cars, but I look at them as, you know, pieces of storytelling equipment. I mean,
Absolutely.
I love cars because I love the story associated with a car. When a car has no story, and that's why I don't own new cars, it just, you know, they have zero personality.
What is the newest car you have?
I have a 2010 Maybach, which I
Okay.
bought new, but it's a car that was only built 6, and I bought the last one out of the production line.
Now we asked your wife. You've got 200 cars. Is that right?
Yeah,
or does she
correct.
Not know, or
It's
are a
very
few that
correct.
She doesn't know about.
Yeah, it's no. She
Yeah,
actually
there's a couple
knows
in
of.
the basement. And
Well, she knows of everything, but every now and again something pops up, and she tries to. She says, "Is this new one?" I'm like, "No, it's been there." She's like, "Don't lie to me. I know when you're lying. Your eye is twitching."
Where they have shoes, you.
Well, the thing is, my father used to say, "The man with the most toys wins," and I kept that in my head. But he also said, having 2 cars is excess. Having 3 cars is madness. Having 4 cars, it's a virus. And I ended up with 200 and something. So I guess I have got terminal cancer.
Yeah, there's no cure.
The thing about it is because the cars all speak to me in different ways, shape, and form. And owning
yeah.
these cars, it's like owning a piece of automotive, history. No matter how
It's
big or
beyond
awesome.
history. I mean, the reason I've set up here, A, because of the lights, but B,
The DeLorean.
we
Well-
know it's a terrible car. I mean, the history has told us it's a terrible car. Doesn't matter. Everyone wants one.
But you know what it is? Terrible is only subjective to whoever looks at it. Now, what do you need a car for?
Well, A to B. That can't do.
Well, that does A to B. It may take you 2 days to get to B, but it's not a Ferrari. It's not about performance. You see what John Delorean set out to do? He wanted to do a very affordable sports car for the average Joe Blog who wanted to buy one. So if you were the guy who worked in a bank and you had a small salary of $30,000, $40,000 a year, you could afford to buy a sports car.
So that was the idea, the
was
drive
the
behind it.
Yes.
But then
But he wanted, he was set up. I know because I
Oh, really?
have done a lot of John Delorean talks. I do a lot of talks nationwide, and I go to seminars and talk about the art of the automotive history. And John Delorean is always a subject that comes up. I think he was set up. He was set up because he bit a bit more than he could control and manage.
Because it just went from 0 to 100 straight away, didn't it?
Not necessarily. Now, a
Thatcher
lot of
gave
things
him God
about
knows how much.
A lot of things about John Delorean people didn't know is that he is the inventor or he's the creator of the muscle car. Now, did you know that?
What nationality was John?
He was actually American, but he's a Romanian American.
Romanian American responsible for
born-
the muscle car.
Craze, yes. So John Delorean was a junior automotive designer for GM, for General Motors. And then he got promoted because he was very talented and he came up with these amazing designs. In a most unfortunate situation, which was they brought him into, yeah, well, they brought him into revamp Pontiac.
Okay.
They brought him over to revamp Pontiac. In 1963, he was appointed head of the Pontiac division of the General Motors division. And he knew he had no tools because General Motors' babies at the time was Cadillac and Chevrolet. Cadillac was a rich man's car. Chevrolet was the average man's car for the day-to-day guy. And Pontiac was the old man's car. It was like the market, the demographic for the Pontiac was a 55 to 70-year-old guy who wants a comfortable luxury vehicle that you just get him from A to B.
And this is what, late 70s?
This is no, this is early 60s, 63.
What? Really? Wow, okay.
So he was appointed, and he was a very young, and if you read about John Delorean, he was the youngest GM General Motors ever had because he was super talented. So they appointed him head of Pontiac, and he realized he had no tools. He had no tools. He couldn't do anything with Pontiac because he had no backing. They just set him up for. They set him up for failure, and
do you know what that is?
Yep,
What is
that's
that?
a Ford starting.
What, a GT500?
No,
Okay.
that's a Ford truck
Oh,
with
it's a truck.
possibly a 305. Actually not a 305, a 289 or a 302, or maybe a 351. I'm not sure, but they all have that same noise.
Okay.
So he realized he had no money to resurrect the brand. So why did they give him a dead brand? So in 1964, he told his engineers, screw the program. I'm not going to build cars for 55 to 80-year-old guys dying. We're going to take our motor, which is a 289 motor, which was a Pontiac 289 motor, and we're going to put triple cabs on it, and we're going to make it the fastest car that we're going to show at the motor show in New York at the Motorama. Not knowing to the execs for General Motors, on the day the show opened, he presented the muscle car. They all looked at him, they're like, you just single-handedly killed Pontiac. Pontiac is a 90-year-old, a 55 to 80-year-old guy that buys a Pontiac. Why you give him a 3 carburetors and try and push him into all this muscle? He goes, because even old men like speed. And then he got the attention of everybody because all the Pontiacs that were put into all the shops, all the dealerships, they were selling because all of a sudden people wanted fast sedans, sleepers, as they call it. Like, you know.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second because as this story continues, this just shows how bad society and the media is. We only focus on the negative side of people's failure.
Correct. Well,
This
the
guy-
point is a lot of people didn't know about all of that. Give me 1 second. Alejandro, stop. All you're doing, help him reverse that car in there so I don't have him hit any of those cars. Go there. Yep.
If you need to go and
No, that's okay.
save something.
You're not helping him, and he has no vision. Alejandro. Okay. Tell him not to go any further. Stop there. Alejandro. Stop it there. Stop the car there. Don't for him not to go any further because he has no vision. He can't see. He might end up hitting one of those cars. Anyway, where were we at? So, back to where we're at. John Delorean was appointed head of the Pontiac division in 1963, going to 64. In 64, the Motorama, he comes out with a car called the muscle car. He didn't have anything, he didn't know what to call it. They said, what's a muscle car? They started laughing at him. He says, it's a car with packed up of muscle. Even old people like speed. It was so popular, the next car he brought was a GTO. When they interviewed him and said, why do you have a GTO? What does that stand for? He goes, well, Ferrari has a GTO, so I'll call my car a GTO.
God almighty. All right.
Now, in 65, the first GTOs, or the first, what they called, the triple cab Pontiacs, were out. They were so popular that everybody took notice. All of a sudden, the big boys in the muscle car games, like Mustang, and more importantly, Dodge, said, fuck that. This kid has got a fucking great concept. So they developed the Hemi. And the muscle car, in response to what John Delorean did. The muscle car race began by one guy.
A guy we never would have thought it would have been.
In
You
19
always associate that with Shelby or something.
Correct. No, all of those guys, the first guy to put the big motor in a small car was that guy. Anyway, long story short, Shelby then joined the race in 65, 66. Everybody joined on the bandwagon.
But it's amazing that
And then they fired him.
muscle car.
That's his.
It's such a stupid associate. It's a muscle with a car. It can't be. But yeah, I can imagine the first time somebody said it. It was like,
They thought everybody laughed at him in the 60s. They're like, this guy has totally lost his plunkers. Yeah, what the hell he's talking about? Anyway, he says, all the old men like speed. Long story short, after all of that, he became known as the muscle car guy. In 67, after they did so well, they thought this kid brought us to as much as we can, Pontiac. They fired him. When they fired him,
They fired him because he was too good,
Well, the point is this.
or too disruptive.
They thought he was very, 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 very edgy. And he was very, very long-term, short-term, he did produce the results. But long-term, he was killing the brand. So they decided to bring back the Pontiac for old people. Classic, 3-speed, gliders, big couchy chairs. So they fired him. So he was so mad that he was fired that he became so disillusioned with life. So he went into depression. And then he said, you know what, screw these guys. I'm gonna make my own car. So he started asking for funding. He looked for funding all around the US, and everybody that promised him let him down. And a great idea came to him. That idea is called Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher decided to look at...
Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, yeah. She started looking at people who might be able to bring industry to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And John Delorean said, well, I'll do that. I'll bring my factory to Northern Ireland. And because of his past, of his CV,
She said yes.
Margaret Thatcher gave him his first big loan to set the whole thing up. The whole factories were set on taxpayers' money. And it was important to do that because they needed to keep Northern Irish people employed, keep them in Northern Ireland. There was a mass exodus of Nordish Irish people into mainland UK, mainland England. So they wanted to put factories in Northern Ireland so that Northern Ireland becomes self-sustainable, so as to fight against the IRA, because they needed that, Sinn Féin was pushing.
Holy hell.
This is all politics that you didn't get it. So he had a loan, but like most British loans, you got to pay back at some time.
Unlike an American loan.
Unlike an American loan, you can keep rewriting it over and over.
I just found out reinsurance is a whole thing.
So when they came calling, obviously he had built this brand, DeLorean Motor Company. He had built his cars that were supposed to be the future. If you look at that car, stainless steel, it would never rust. Just the production of that car alone was... It's stainless steel.
Jesus.
Stainless steel, it's steel, but it's stainless, so it's coated with stainless. It shouldn't rust unless it's had a hit, it's had a damage, and the stainless, it's like a knife. It's your fork and knife. Your fork and knife never rust. Stainless steel.
Yeah. But then
So-
what happened?
The cost of building was so expensive that it was never his money. It was British taxpayers' money, built in Northern Ireland. And then he thought he was going to hit the market and it was going to explode. But he didn't realize that the politics of building a car and selling it is different from the politics of just building a good car.
Yeah.
There's so many good cars that are built by so many individual people out there, but they don't sell it. When you control the market like GM, you can literally shut down the tap and open the tap anytime you want. So basically GM made sure he couldn't sell the cars. to shut him out.
So you
by
think
making
it was an utter way of...
No, it was very disruptive for everything GM was doing. For a guy that they had fired to come up with a concept, get the cars built in Northern Ireland to come back and sell them in the US of A. It was very disruptive. So it was not money ending back into taxpayers' money here. It was all money ending back into British taxpayers' money, and he wanted to sell it back in the US. So Margaret Thatcher called the loan, and he had to pay.
She called it?
Yes, because the loan had to be paid.
How long was he out for?
Well, about 2 years. It's in the second year. This is an 81.
God almighty, so he didn't have much time to get this thing going.
He didn't have much time to get it going.
I mean, Tesla is a complete and utter failure as a company, and he's still...
But he's a billionaire. He doesn't need no loans.
No, he just gets the
just
fucking
prints his
carbon
money.
tax
Yeah.
rebates and everything.
That's it.
But so he didn't have that luxury of...
Margaret Thatcher called the loan. Then his neighbor set him up. His neighbor was arrested for possession of cocaine for distribution. His next door neighbor.
He's as in
where he lived. Yeah. In the
Distribution
US.
of cocaine.
Yes. So his neighbor knew that he was so desperate for money because he was trying to get money and raising money from everybody. His neighbors told the fucking Colombians, look, I need to get out of my deal with the DEA. The DEA want me to set somebody up big. And I think it was even a setup from the corporate side of GM. They all wanted him gone. He was a problem child. So they brought these guys who came in and offered him a whole bunch of 20 million deal if he basically agreed to get the cars, the cocaine shipped to England, put in his cars, and he did agree all of that in a hotel room. It's all documented. You should go watch a documentary. He agreed to basically get the cars, the cocaine brought into England, put that in the doors of the cars. So you see how it was designed? Look, it was designed so that he could put loads of cocaine into that big edgy part right there.
What?
He designed it afterwards to be able to move cocaine.
John Delorean, that's what John Delorean...
Because he needed the money to pay the British government back. And then after they signed the deal and everything, and they made the first delivery, and the first cars were fitted with cocaine and shipped here, he was arrested and was put in jail. And that was the end of the company. And Margaret Thatcher was stuck with a cocaine dealer, car manufacturer. So the whole thing came to an end. Overnight. In 1983, the factory was shut. The factory only lasted 3 years. And every now and again, they still do a big DeLorean reunion in Northern Ireland, where they talk about all the factory workers that are still alive, about the 3 best years of DeLorean.
Is he still in prison?
No, he died.
He died?
He died, yeah. I'm in talks with his daughter right now to have a special on an event that I'm doing here for DeLorean. They're trying to make a movie of him.
There's a company somewhere rebuilding
Yeah,
them? Or
on the license. On the license from the daughter, from Jackie. Jackie's given this company in Texas license to rebuild.
How long was he in prison for?
He did, I think he was in prison for 25 years, 27 years, but he did some time and he was let out for reprimanded out, but he died. They buried him.
What?
You didn't know all of this?
No.
You should know your car stuff. Anyway, going back to DeLorean.
But this isn't car stuff.
This is the
That's
history of
corporate America. That's how
Yeah.
easily...
That's how they bury you if they think you're a threat to their
Yeah.
society, yes. If these cars were built in Texas or in Michigan or any in the USA, he would have never had a problem.
Wow. Detroit don't have that kind of power anymore, do they?
Well, they're sold out. America's sold out to China and to Japan.
That's what that stands for, right? Detroit Motor Company?
No, DeLorean Motor Company,
DeLorean Motor Company.
DMC. He had plans to build another car. He actually built 2 gold cars. And the 2 gold cars, one was supposed to be sold to Yetis Savalas, all in gold plated instead of
Instead of that?
yeah. And one was ended up in the collection of Peterson Museum. Was sold at an auction recently for over $1 million, but it's all gold plated.
God almighty.
But the story behind the DeLorean is he tried to do everything by the book, and I believe him.
Yeah.
And he was forced to do things outside the book in order to try and pay the British government and keep his legacy. The only thing that mattered for DeLorean was to keep his legacy.
Yeah.
And he lost his legacy by trying to keep it. How ironic is that?
It's just, I mean, I've never heard 90% of that story.
A lot of people don't know. Now, when people like DeLoreans, they only like it for Michael J. Fox and for Back to the Future.
But that's sort of what's
Made
great.
it iconic.
Yeah.
But it's not just that made it iconic. It's also iconic because it was a very short production car. It was very advanced for its time. It was very, very well engineered, but it had a bad motor because he had to do a deal. None of the American companies wanted to sell him a motor. Ford refused to sell him a motor because he was building in Ireland. So he had to go to the French to get a Renault 30 motor, a V6 Renault 30. The motors are French, yes. The early ones were Volvos. The second ones, Volvo
Do you think
motors.
if he'd gone with the Japanese, he would have had a better, could have been successful?
Oh, maybe, but I don't think Japan was on the map. Japan was doing its thing at the time. The Japanese story was,
did they?
yeah, no, they came in the 70s. The story with Japan is that Japan decided to grow into America, but they did it the smart way. So they worked out a deal, a Japanese collateral deal with Japanese USA trade deal. And it says, we'll allow you to, the Americans said, we'll allow you to sell your cars here if you put your plants here and you give us jobs. Americans are very smart, corporate America.
Well, they were back in the day.
They're still very smart now.
Okay.
Because they're the only country that don't have a Federal Reserve. They print money when and when they need it.
Yeah, but the Federal Reserve's got nothing to do with the government.
Yeah, I know. It's got nothing to do with the government. But I'm saying that they don't need, they just print money when and when they want to. Most people print money on the
back of something.
On the back of something they own. You know, they just like, oh, we need a few $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Oh, I need a few $1 trillion. You know, our good old friend Trump would say, print some more.
Print some more.
Anyway, long story short, the Japanese were smart because the Japanese came into the USA and says, we want to sell our cars here. What do we do? The Americans go, no, we're not wanting you to sell your cars here. He goes, well, you don't open for us, we don't open for you. Americans did not really care so much of the Japanese market, but they thought, wait a second, if this guy's going to bring investments here, well, we just say no. So it says on the assumption that you put all your factories here and they're all built and assembled here.
Sneaky bastards.
It says, yeah, we'll give you guys
Wow.
jobs. So they build all the factories all in California and Sacramento and all those places have all those old, Datsun factories, and they started selling Datsuns. Well, what they didn't realize was how quickly the Americans would bite into the Japanese cars. Because what happened is, the Americans were used to these big gas guzzlers with 5-liter engines.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they got a Mazda 323 or a Toyota Corolla, and they would get them for $10 of gas. They would get them for like a whole week.
Yeah.
So they started liking it. So the Japanese explosion became apparent, and that caused the whole crisis, the whole crisis that they had with the fuel crisis in the 90s, where there were long lines at the gas stations, because all of a sudden the consumption of fuel had dropped. Americans were not consuming fuel. So Americans could not buy as much fuel as they used to buy from the OPEC countries, which was Iraq and Iran.
Yeah.
And then they funded Iraq to go and fight Iran so that they can take over the fuel wells of Iran, which again, they don't tell you this shit. Mm-hmm. They actually sponsored Saddam Hussein. He was one of the lieutenants at the time in the army to go fight Ayatollah Khomeini, because they said, oh, Ayatollah Khomeini was bringing the Muslim state to a democratic country, and therefore they went under the whole political, but in reality, they were looking for the fuel reserves. And after 10 years of Saddam Hussein being fooled to go fight a war that he had no connection to, he realized the Americans were just using him for stupidity. He says, I'm not fighting these guys anymore. I'm tired of fucking killing millions of Iraqis
And looking like the bad guy.
looking like the bad guy. And they decided, I want peace. We're not going to fight this war anymore. All of a sudden, fuel, because then there was no fuel in Iraq, because there's never been so much fuel in Iraq. Iraq accounted for like 2 or 3%, whilst Kuwait is just a geographical. Iraq is a bit mountainous, so the fuel went to both sides. So a lot of fuel went to Iran and a lot of fuel went to Kuwait. And hence the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. Then they realized that there is no fuel, and they needed to have money to develop the country. Anyway, long story short, the Americans had shortage of fuel in their fuel tanks, and these Japanese cars were in the market. That was an explosion. Because you can then have to buy a car, a Toyota Corolla, put $12 of gas, you last you a whole week. When you could buy a big American Cadillac and you put $10, it lasts you a day.
So that's what killed the big American.
That's what killed the big American V8, 8.2 liter. because they were always in excess. They went from the, 5 liter to the 6 liter to the 7 liter. Then they went to the 8.2.
Kept going.
And they became so gigantic, the Eldorados with V8 motors that they're just gas guzzlers. And all of a sudden, boom, Iran-Iraq war. Stop of the Iran-Iraq war, fuel shortages, Japanese cars on the market. Oh my God, what happens? And then that's when what they call the dark ages of the American automotive history began. Dark ages of American automotive history
This is amazing.
began in 1977.
Hold on. What you're right. Once you get going, there's no stopping it.
Yeah, but it's all it's history.
I know.
It's what people don't understand.
I can't tell you how good the lighting is. It's epic. You tell me when you want to stop.
No, but I'll just give you the insights of this, because the dark ages of the American automotive world began right after 1977, 78, when the war began and there was no fuel. And Japanese cars were introduced at the same time, and all of a sudden everybody was switching to Japanese cars because they were more fuel efficient, they were cheaper to buy, they were cheaper to run, cheaper to maintain. And even though they were all imported and some of them were built here, they were more popular for the regular guy who was only wanting to buy a car because there was no fuels at the gas stations.
Did the British ever have a say in this?
No. The Brits always came in here for the high end. The Brits always looked at the Americans not for the average person. You got to realize that Ford is actually an American company that was licensed to work in England, but it was always an American company. Do you get what I'm saying?
No.
Ford is not a British company.
No, it's not a British company.
It's an American company that was licensed to build cars for the British market with a British way of life. So the Zodiac, the Escort, there were cars that were the Fiesta that were built for the British way of life.
Because they never came here, did they? The Escort,
No, because they didn't think they needed that. Had they foreseen this issue with the Japanese, they would have brought all those cars here because they actually co-own that company. Anyway, long story short came when the Americans realized we have an issue with fuel, but it's too late because the Japanese market is taken over. It became the ultimate market. People wanted to buy little Japanese Nissan Bluebirds and Toyota Corollas, and they were just selling hundreds and thousands of those. And the big boys were dying. So what did the big boys do in response to dying? They can't shut the shop. And car manufacturing it's a 7-year cycle. So when you build a motor, you keep the motor for 7 years because of parts, aftermarket.
7 or 17?
7 years. 7 years. Most models are kept for 7 years. The motors are kept for 7 years. The engines are kept for 7 years before they're upgraded and changed.
Right, okay.
Because they need you to be able to have parts for the aftercare of the car. The after part of the car, so they can't keep changing the engines every day. Then it's a mess.
I know the accountant back in England who does it for Mercedes-Benz, and so you wouldn't believe how many spare parts we have for our cars, dating back, God knows how many decades, and the storage facility and the part numbers and everything like that.
They have to keep doing that because they have to keep the clients there. So they keep the engines going for 7 years. The bodies are not so much because the bodies are, the parts that could be, but the engines are most of the things are repairable, but the engines are always kept for a long time. So because they had already re-engineered the 8.2 liter, they didn't want to drop it off, so they had to keep it going as much as possible. Now, the dealers went from selling 3 cars a day or 4 cars a day in dealerships to selling 0 a whole month. No problem. They went from selling...
It's amazing how horrified people can be when they realize.
Yeah, they don't want to be in it. But they went from selling 3 cars a day from selling 0 in a whole month. So a drastic decision had to be taken.
What?
80s.
Okay.
Like down the early 80s, 81, 82.
When was the crash?
79, 80, 81.
Right.
That's when Iraq invaded the valleys in Iran to try and take control of the fuel because Uncle Sam wanted the fuel.
This is amazing. This isn't a story about, tire tread or...
No.
rack and pinion steering, or
No,
this is the real history of.
This is the automotive history of the world. This is what shapes what we have.
Yeah.
People say, oh, because of the 80s, Americans lost the plot. It's true, they lost the plot because they were trying to reconfigure everything to match the European cars now and the Japanese cars. They're like, dude, we got to make cars running a lot more. So they started inventing the V6 engines, trying to gone from the V8, they cut down again. They went to 3.8 liters from 7.2.
Because it was.
No, the V6 was always around, but it was always considered as a shitty motor. They started bringing them back because they're like, we're going to take 2 cylinders off. Maybe that's going to make the people buy the car. Why do we have to have an 8-cylinder car and that's so heavy and drink so much fuel? But they did something that was very special. And I'm telling you this because they were very ingenious, Americans. They figured out in the late 70s that we're not selling cars. But they already built all this big, huge, already got all this metal pressed for these huge Cadillacs and huge Lincolns. So Lincoln said, I'm going to start doing collaborations with designers. So Lincoln decided to do in '79 what they call a collection series, thinking that it's going to push the buyer in buying the car.
And who are the designers?
So the first Lincoln they did was called the Silver Jubilee, designed by Lincoln themselves.
Okay.
And it was supposed to be a special edition Lincoln. And this is way before people started thinking of doing special editions. So Lincoln is the one that started the special edition. So you got to give them that. Nowadays you go to AMG Super Sport. They did it. Everybody, that marketing was a Lincoln piece of genius. So that's what we're going to do is 4 collection of designer cars. We're going to call one a Silver Jubilee. And we're going to have it designed by top designers here. And we're going to make sure that people that buy it will feel they have something super special. And they kept the price, the standard price, but they gave people a lot more for their money. Electric seats, velour. In those days, velour was more expensive than leather. Leather was considered a driver's choice of car because it had to last. He has to put his ass on it. It has to last. Velour had just been invented because they had just invented plastic in the 70s and they were so into velour. Look at those 80s and 70s. Everything was velour and cornrows. And do you remember that period? So they were like, oh, I have money. I have made material, not cow skin. It's amazing how shit things. Okay.
So it's man-made, so therefore
it's cooler.
It's cooler.
Yeah, because you had to be special to have that shit made for you. Wow. Okay. Anyway, so they went with velour interiors and they made the Silver Jubilee edition. And they didn't do so well with that. Straight away they thought, wait a second, we need to get an Italian designer, an American designer, and a French designer. Because everybody's talking European. Right. So they approached 3 major designers. The American designer was Bill Blass. He was the best of the time. He did amazing stuff. They got him to design a Bill Blass edition. They made about 2,000 cars. All these cars were white and black. Bill Blass, he designed the whole interior. The interior was stunning. The car was stunning. It's like, oh, I have a Bill Blass edition, which means, I have a designer edition. They went to the Italian designer and they said, okay, we want you to do a car. He says, okay, what is it? They said, well, why don't you do a car? He's like, well, I don't want to do it. Guess who the designer was? Gucci. I don't want to do it. I'm not want to put my stuff into cars. So they said, fuck you then. They went to a guy in France called Givenchy. They said, Givenchy, do our cars for us. Givenchy said, I'll do your cars. They did the rarest. Givenchy did 817 Givenchy model cars. I used to own one.
I've seen that on the back of one of
those cars, Givenchy edition.
Holy hell.
I used to own one. They were super rare, and I did the biggest mistake ever selling it because it's only 817 were ever built. Sold it to another collector who would never sell it, which is a problem. But never mind.
How much is it worth now?
Oh, they're worth big money now if you get an original Givenchy car. Because they came with a phone in the car, they came with the leather, the Givenchy crest, they even had the Givenchy stuff for your wife, like the little case for your jewelry and stuff, jewelry case.
God damn.
There were some details in the Givenchy,
yeah,
which was great. But then they went to Cartier, and they did a Cartier edition too. So they did the Cartier edition, the Givenchy edition, the Bill Blass edition.
It's amazing when you see these things on cars and it just doesn't register that actually that's the history of that.
They were the first. 79, they brought those 4.
What's that one?
That's a Dodge. That's a 6.1 SRT. I can tell from just hearing it. So, anyway, long story short, my stories are never short, but long story short, which is ironic, Gucci felt like, shit, I should have taken that deal when he saw how successful this thing started selling in America. So Gucci actually approached Cadillac and said, if I'm gonna fuck with anybody, not with Lincoln, I wanna fuck with Cadillac. So they did a special edition Cadillac Gucci. And that was a Seville Bustleback Cadillac Gucci. I used to own one, but that was real long time ago in really bad shape. I sold it because it was impossible to restore it. I'm after one right now. They only did, I'll say about 213, 214 pieces.
God almighty.
And it was a Cadillac Gucci edition.
So I have to
And
ask,
that was all to sell those big engine cars because they couldn't sell them. They were sitting there on the shelves. No one would buy them.
you had to put this designer-esque on it. So, I guess the burning question is, how the fuck do you afford all this?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a car guy. Okay, so I'll give you a little story about myself. My father said when I was a kid, the man with the most toys wins. I kept that in my head. And that was very important because I figured out, you know what, I'm gonna have the most toys. So I started by collecting little toy cars. And then I grew quickly into driving cars because my dad had a chauffeur who would let me drive at 15. And then by 17, I was like, Dad, I want a car. My dad made me the ultimate promise. He says, if you go and earn your own money and you come with half the money, I'll buy you a car for the other half. 6 months later, I bought my first car. Now, after I bought my first car, I thought, dude, I've just bought my own car. I became car obsessed.
What was the first one?
My first car was actually a Saab, the 99 Saab.
Okay.
And I wanted to be different. So I had a 99 Saab because I thought that was different. I always said to myself and to my friends, my cars is not like yours. If people know my stuff, then people will know it for the story of it. And you know the story about Saabs and fighter jets? That's on another day. I could spend.
That could be chapter 2.
That's chapter 5.
5, okay.
But honestly, the car that my father made me buy changed my whole life. If he had bought me a car, I'd maybe not be a collector today. But because I actually earned it myself,
Yeah.
I learned how I could earn and get anything I wanted.
See, it's interesting. I met a guy a couple of days ago who did 2 tours in Iraq, and he's got a 2-year-old kid, and he said, my kid will want for nothing, but everything he wants, he's going to have to earn.
Well, he's very wrong there because I also wanted my kids to want for nothing, but my kids don't like cars.
Oh.
You see, there is a very special
But
bond.
you've got girls.
I got girls, but other girls are not. There's a special bond because what happens is this. My father didn't have the cars that I wanted him to have. So I was motivated. When I found out I could go earn my own car, I was motivated to buy the cars that my father did not have.
So you, traded your way through?
I traded my way through and I started buying cars. My third car was a Maserati Ghibli. And I was only 19.
Third car?
I was only 19 years old with the Ghibli. And everybody thought I drove my father's car, and he even took credit for it. He goes, yes, that's my car. I'm living later with my son, but it was my car. I earned it and paid for it. But the beautiful thing was this. Had my father had all those Ghiblis, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, I'll probably get up I'll probably be born a spoiled brat, not appreciating it.
Yeah.
The lack of not having it
Made
me want it more. My kids are born into the cars. Now my daughters, if I tell them another car show, they're like, oh, daddy. Oh, they go like this. That's the truth.
Didn't you do one already?
I spend all days, every day, car talk. My kids are bored to shit. They were born in that lifestyle. And when they were born, I already had over 100 cars. So for them, it was like a norm,
God,
you know?
the headache of that much.
It's kind of easy. It's kind of easy. It's amazing how easy it is to have all those.
I live in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment and I have too much stuff.
Well, cars are not stuff. I see cars like babies, like children. And every single one of them tells me a story.
You don't give them names, do you?
No.
Good,
No.
okay.
I did in the beginning, but I gave up about the 6th or 7th car. I gave up.
You realised that was a...
I just call the car for what it is.
Yeah.
You know, giving them names.
So you traded your way through. You come across as quite an honest person. The second-hand car trade is not an honest man's.
Well, the whole
realm.
point is this. There are 2 kinds of people. the perception that the secondhand car trader is not an honest person is totally wrong. Because there is a man who buys cars because he sees it as an easy buck, but that's the same guy who sells you a window to an old 88-year-old woman who does not need double glazing and sells it to her because she sees an easy buck. The same guy who sells you I got 2 of my teeth completely torn apart because I was done by a guy who saw me as an easy, easy buck. Like he said, oh, your 2 teeth are rotten. I gotta, pull them out and so that I could pay more money. But when I got to find out, it wasn't that bad. That could have been fixed. So back to what I was saying is, there are dishonest and honest people in every walk of life.
Yep.
But the secondhand car trader has been always seen as a dodgy geezer, only because they've done that only because it fits the rim of what we've all known as TV stuff. It's a television myth. It's the same. I'm telling you,
my
it's a television.
experience is not quite.
Because there are 2 types of people. There is the person like me who's only interested in cars because of its love and its history. If I sell you a car, and my wife would tell you this, I've had people here that come and go, I want to buy that car, and I said, it's not for you, sir. And they're like, why? I said, because I know you don't have the love for it. I know you wouldn't look after it. I can tell. And there are certain people that they don't care. They bought it for $10 and they want to sell it for $12. And they want that $2 extra. So they would tell you lies. But those people exist in every walk of life. In dentistry, in medicine, and people remove people's good organs and put them bad organs just because they can get through $200,000. Take full advantage. The second-hand car dealer is not. You want to close up?
Are you bringing the Maybach in? Do I need the ramps?
No, we'll take it home.
The taxi's coming in?
The taxi's coming in. We don't need the ramps for the taxi.
Do you need to be helping?
No, I'll just do the taxi. That's okay. I have my team, but my wife just wanted to know if I was going to put the Maybach in here tonight. I'll take it home because in the morning I could...
So we'll wrap up because I know you've got to... And it's late. You've been doing this for...
Oh, where's your
12
girlfriend?
hours.
She's still around?
She had to go.
She left. Okay.
She's up early.
Did they tow your car? Good. I'm glad. No worries.
So, you're probably one of the most successful car
No.
traders in the
I'm
world.
a very humble guy. No. I am a car connoisseur, car lover, and car enthusiast before anything else.
Yeah.
Whether I sell or I buy a car is secondary. 80% of the cars I own were sold to me because the people loved me, not because they needed the money. I'll give you a good story, and this is a real deal. I was born in London in 1972. When I was born premature. My father was out of town, and I had to basically be named. So my mom, at the time, ELO was #1, and my mom named me ELO.
You were after ELO, Electric Light Orchestra.
Correct. Anyway.
Oh, now you've just turned into one. You already were one of my favourite people. Now that's it. That's the soundtrack to this now. Mr. Blue.
Yeah, he was cool. I was not a big fan because I was a baby, but what do I know? I got up and I kind of named after the band. But anyway, long story short, my father had to fly back. Back in the days, you had to basically be told you're going to be called at a certain time to go to the home or to the office and wait for the call. So all of a sudden, there was this frantic way of trying to get hold of my dad. My dad comes on the phone. Yes, we just had the baby. Oh my God. My dad flies back. I am in the hospital with my mom. Then they discharged me a couple of days, actually 7 days later, because they figured out even though I was born premature, I was still okay. And my father owned a 1969 DS, Citroen DS.
Oh, the big, long, huge
stock-looking thing with suspension.
Yeah.
So...
Not a lowrider.
No, that's the S suspension is not a lowrider. So he puts me in the car and he takes me home. So when I started the museum in 2004, I told my dad, I said, Dad, there's a car that belongs in the museum. He was alive at the time. And my dad said, okay, what car is it? I said, your old car. Do you have a logbook, a copy of the papers? Like all the old school boys, they have every single paper for every shit. They made fucking copies and copies just in case.
Just in case, even if they haven't got the car in.
Yeah, he sold the car a long time ago, in the early 70s, he sold the car on and bought something else. Anyway, I took the logbook. I kept tipping the guys. I tipped the guys at DVLA to give me who owned the car. And I was hoping it wasn't crushed or smashed or anything. And I finally got the lead where the car was. It was in Northern Ireland in Belfast. So I go to Belfast to this guy's house, knock on the door. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm not going to BS you, but my father owned the car you own. He's like, no, I don't own it anymore. I sold it to my boy in Cork. I'm like, but it says you own it. He goes, yeah, here in Ireland, when we sell shit, we don't put it in people's names. We just leave it the way it is. He says, okay, where's your guy live? In Cork. So now I go to Southern Ireland to a guy called Pat Crawley. He owns a timber decking company. I get there, I'm like, hi, you Pat Crawley? He's like, yeah. I said, look, you own a car that used to belong to my dad. I just want to have a reunion with it, and because that was the first sensation of me rolling on 4 wheels. And he says, what car is it? I said, the DS. He goes, yeah, for sure. He says, come, let me show it to you. He showed it to me. It was all in bits. It needed restoration. I said, I want that car. I want to buy that car. He says, how much would you pay? I said, well, at the time, they're worth about 10 grand. He goes, I say it's 7 grand. This is in 2004. I said, well, 7 grand. Can you do better? He says, no, 7 grand. I said, look, this car is the first sensation of me driving. Since you want 7 grand, I have 5 grand on me. Tomorrow morning, I'll go to the bank, get 2 more £1,000 and add that and buy the car. Call it a day. He says, yeah, okay, fine. Then he goes into his kitchen with his wife, talks to her, come back. He goes, son, show me your money. So I put 5 grand. He took 2 grand of that 5 grand. He gave me the 3,000 back. He says, I paid 2 grand for the car. I can't believe myself to sell you this car for a penny profit. This car belongs to you. So I bought it for 2 grand.
And then I had to put it in the back of a truck and
put it in the back of a truck, shipped it back to England, restored it, and just before I finished restoring it, my father died, passed away abruptly, out of complications with his heart and stuff. He never saw the car finished, but he knew I had the car, and he was looking forward to seeing the car finish. That car sits in the London Motor Museum on the far left-hand corner. Now, no money in the world will separate me from that car. It doesn't matter whether you put $1 million or $50 million. Maybe my daughters won't care about the affiliation. But that's the first sensation of me actually rolling on 4 wheels. How lucky am I to have that sensation? To own the first sensation of rolling. Most people were brought home in a taxi, in the tube.
Yeah.
I can say that began my car craze.
It's amazing. So the value of a car isn't
not
Kelly
in the
Blue
steel.
Book or anything like that. It's
Kelly Blue Book is what the insurance company needs to pay you back because they needed some kind of a quote-unquote value.
value for it.
But the value in the car, it's in the seller and the buyer. I'll give you a good example. This is your car. The story behind this car, I bought it for $8,300 in Rancho Cucamonga.
Where is
and
that?
then California.
Oh, okay.
Driving through a little small village, which I always do, not the freeways, because you don't see shit on the freeways. Driving through a small village, see this amazing car. Sat there at a gas station, 10,000 on year offer. Pulled up, yes. This is
it's
a
got
long
a for
time
sale
ago.
sign in the
For sale sign. I pull up, I didn't even know what I was buying. I said, look, I want the DeLorean. He's like, yeah, 10,000. I offered him 5, like you do. He says, no. He says, I'll take 9. I ended up 7. No. We ended up at 8. No. 85. We ended up at 83. Shook hands. I went to the bank, got the money, and bought the car. The car had red interior. It was all beat. Because of the sun, the body of the car is great because there's no rust.
Yeah.
And because of the sun, all the interior is freckled and broken and smashed. I had to restore it. I bring it back to London. I start restoring
You
it.
shipped back to London? Oh, okay.
Shipped it back to the museum.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost the light. We've just lost the light.
It's a signal. Where do you want to get?
We lost the light. We'll just go 1 more minute. He turned the light off. There. There you go. So we brought it back to London. My guy said, okay, let's restore it. Talking to our DeLorean guy. He says, wait a second. You're one of 3 cars that were built with red interior. We only built 3 with red interior. They were show cars. They were the motor show cars. That's why they did them with the
I
red
thought you'd
interior.
done that afterwards.
We did that afterwards, but it was built with red interior. They
Wow.
were very rare to build them with
Because they
red
were
interior.
always grey.
Gray.
Yeah.
Gray with gray because the British government wanted something that could sail.
Boring. Yeah.
So these were the motor show cars that were brought to Detroit, to New York.
Oh my God! So this was like the show. This was the
The show
one.
car, yeah. That would have been to either New York, Detroit, or Los Angeles. That's the story of that car. Now, I would have sold that car to so many people by now. People come here all the time. They go, wow, 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 I want. But what's the point? I'll go buy one that has no story about it.
Yeah.
So the value of a car, going back to the value of a car, it's really the value I give to it and the value you're prepared to pay for it. Sometimes you would say, I'm prepared to pay $30,000, $40,000. I say, I want $200,000. We don't meet, but you can't say it's not worth $200,000. Katie Brubeck would tell you something, which is what the insurance is prepared to pay for it. But it does not necessarily mean that's the value. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Value is locked into the owners.
Yeah.
The buyer and the seller make the value.
So
The
you-
minute the buyer and the seller sell a car, value is established.
This
Especially
is
when
this is a masterclass in
Especially when the seller is an enthusiast. Then that's when the real value is.
yeah.
That's why you see cars at $17 million. The seller wants to buy it. The seller wants to sell it only for 17. The buyer is prepared to pay 17
And it's because of the story.
because of the story behind it.
This is why I hate Amazon, because Amazon's got no story.
Well, what we try to do here at the Miami Supercar Rooms is push these stories. We do it on all different formats, not just on cars. We do the art of shaving. We have a guy come and talk about shaving. In 3 weeks' time, we'll be doing the art of shoe polishing.
Right. There's
The
an
guy-
art to it.
There's an art to it.
Okay.
Kids used to go to school to learn to be a shoe polisher. It was a career back in the day. Nowadays, you just buy them so cheap, you don't need to polish them. You remember going to New York and you get the guy sitting there go,
Yeah, I know. I didn't think that was a.
those guys are
Studied
a
career.
master. They're master shoe polishers. Cigar rolling.
I tell you what. There's Lula V.
They
down
did
there.
a cigar roller there. I used
No,
the same guy.
I know the guys there quite well, and Carlos there is the detailer, and
Yes.
he introduces himself as the detailer, and I'm like, you're not the. As the car washer, or as the guy who vacuums the car. No,
A detailer is
You're
an
s-
art.
It's an art.
It's an art of detailing. It's an
yeah,
art.
and it's complete. Wow, this is craftsmanship and art is a huge thing which we
The
lose.
problem with our lives today is that we want everything instant.
Yeah.
And we do not stop to really understand the art of things anymore. Now things are just seen as flat. Oh, what's this? It's 6 words in Wikipedia. That's what it is. Fuck you. Boom. What's that? The art of tattooing. Tattooing is putting ink in your body. Boom.
Done.
If you know where tattooing came from, the Japanese warriors, it's insane. It's a total different expression of Japanese art, an expression of Japanese power and hierarchy. It's a total different concept.
Bloody hell. I tell you what.
And
we're
we
gonna-
do a lot of these things here.
Let's start. This is as a week, maybe as a weekly feature. I come here for an hour or two, and we just extract
could-
wisdom from you. 'Cause
Well, it's
this
not
is-
just wisdom. It's all about understanding our world today. The craftsman is gone.
Well, it's also piecing together all the pieces that you know.
And it all makes,
It's-
when you start seeing them come together, you see how the world was shaping
Yeah.
as it's moving forward. Like a big ball rolling around.
Blimey.
But
Right.
most of this I do for talks. You know,
Yeah?
I do talks, corporate talks. I go and teach corporate America about stuff they should know.
Right. So people
do.
watching this, how do they get in touch with you then?
Simple. You just find the afro in the crowd. I'm the man. And if you don't know, then you're not in the know.
You don't know, you're not in the know. So it's been an absolute
Nice
pleasure.
meeting you.
Thank you.
And we should do some more. I think what we should do is plan it up. Oh, I pressed the button.